this is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 330 of Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by Rapid Deploy and supported by InDigital, the leader in next-gen core services. And man, there is so much that is going on. I wish I could tell you everything right now, but I can't. I will be telling you all here shortly. Soon enough, you will find out everything that's going on. It's June 25th right now, so probably in about 2 or 3 weeks, I will be able to let you know everything that is going on. I cannot wait. But going on from there, a big thanks to the patrons for your continued support. There is all kinds of new content that is coming. You are getting this episode early, so everyone who is a patron, you get early access to episodes ad-free, and a bunch of other things that are coming. The behind the scenes series, the little mini doc that I did at the Georgia Emergency Communications Conference, a lot of stuff that's coming. So thank you so much again to the patrons for everything. And my guest today, I am very excited to have her on. I met her back at the Alameda conference. We had actually been talking a while before that over social media and everything, but I officially met her at the most recent Alameda conference, and it has been awesome. A very good friend, was also a keynote speaker at Dare to Be Great conference, did the opening session at the Alameda conference, just so many good things. And I'm going to bring her back up on the screen here. And my guest today is Rosa, and she is the manager with Alameda County Regional ECC in California. How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you for having me today. Very excited to be here.
Of course. This is good. You know, I wanted to have you on actually at the Alameda conference. You had a lot of duties though. You were busy. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to save it and have her come on a different time. And here we are. So I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you. We were a little we were shaking and moving back then. So yeah, it was pretty busy, but it was an amazing conference and our biggest one thus far. So we're hoping 2021 will be our biggest yet, but with the current situation, we don't know, but we're still very hopeful.
Yeah, there is a lot of stuff that is going on. I mean, so we recently had heard that the national conferences had canceled. Both NENA and APCO canceled their conferences, which is a bummer because that was going to be, you know, over there in your home state, and that was going to be fun. And but you know, ultimately, it's about the health and everything of everyone. So, you know, I am glad that they did it. It sucks. I'm not going to get to see everyone. And we're all going to be missing out on that time spent. But, you know, health, we need to stay healthy. So I'm all about that.
Absolutely. Health is wealth. And I think kudos to APCO and NENA for canceling in the spirit of keeping all of us healthy.
For sure. Now, there's a lot of other things that are going on and a lot of things that we're going to be talking about here as well. But what I want to visit first is I want to go back in time a little bit, and I want to learn a lot more about you and your public safety career, your 911 story. You know, how did you get involved in public safety to begin with? Did you have family that was involved, or did you fall into it? How did it happen for you?
Well, I actually think about this often when I count my blessings because I kind of fell into it, just like a lot of us, right? We hear it time and time again. No one grows up saying, or the majority of us don't grow up saying, hey, when I grow up, I'm going to be a 911 dispatcher. And I think I shared a little bit about this on at Dare to Be Great 2020, championing your cause is, I first generation, born here. My parents are immigrants, and I never heard about college in my household. What I heard was go to school and then get yourself a government job, and you're golden, right? And what they meant by that was, you get your benefits, you have an income that can support your family, and you have a pension. That's the immigrant's dream is, they come here for growth, to progress, and for the next generation, their children, to be better than them. So interestingly enough, as I was growing up, I actually wanted to join the military. I actually wanted to be in the Navy. And I will tell you that I found that calling when I watched A Few Good Men with Demi Moore, if all of you remember that. And I was like, I want to be Demi Moore. I want to be a JAG. I want to be there. I mean, I've always been good at arguing anyway. So, man, it's a natural fit for me.
Yeah.
But things went on in my life where, I didn't have a lot of guidance. I had my first child at a very young age. So I was at that point where I really needed to find plan B. A 4-year college wasn't the right move for me. I had a young family. I couldn't join the military and run off. So what was the next step? And I did I got my associates. I did like an 18-month, one of those career colleges where they prepare you to work in an office in the computer science field. And after that, a couple years after 9/11, I was really starting to explore what are my options? Is what I'm doing right now what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? And can that sustain me and my family? And I went back to my roots of you need to find a government job. And I was at a point where I didn't know if I wanted to be a police officer, a paramedic, join the fire service. And as I'm doing research in my hometown, I noticed, because, now I'm just researching all these city government websites, county websites, and like a lot of people trying to figure out what positions I could fall into or what MQs, what minimum qualifications do I have to qualify for this position. And 911 was there. And I read the job description, and like many of us, I'm like, this sounds like something I could do, right? And this sounds like something I can do in the meantime until I figure out what I really want to do.
Right.
And, it was very exciting for me to go through the process. It took me about 9 months to get hired in my hometown. The benefit to that was, I was in my community. Learning geography wasn't a huge challenge for me, right? Because when people would call in and they'd describe a store, they'd describe the location, or they'd give me a name, I knew in my mind where that was. And I was also able to use my language. I speak Spanish. I'm fluent. I read and write in it, and I speak it, obviously. And I didn't have to use a language line. I was able to use one of the things I'm blessed with, my first language, which because I spoke Spanish first and then learned English in school, to use that to benefit me and my team, right, and the community. So I got into it in 2003. And started as your line level dispatcher. And that's where I got started. And little by little just started progressing, had to leave my hometown, my home agency, to promote, to do the things that I wanted to do for my career. And here I am. I'm at my new agency, Alameda County Regional. I came here in 2013 and I'm still here, and it's my new home.
Man. So there's a lot to this. I mean, I mean, what was the training like? Even the hiring process when you went in. I mean, was it anything that was overwhelming right off the bat? You know, when because the reason I ask is for me, when I first started out, this was a small police department, and so I don't know how big your first agency was, but there was only I think maybe 3 or 4 of us, maybe 5 dispatchers, and it was 8 hours just us by ourselves. I mean, there were about 12 sworn police officers that were working this, small police department. So there wasn't a lot to it, but they just threw me in. And but even before that, in the hiring process, the interview alone, it was the chief of police and the lieutenant sitting there asking me questions, and and I don't know if their seating had anything to do with it because the chief is like right here, and the lieutenant is just in back, and I'm looking both ways, looking at them, and they're just firing questions at me over and over and over and over, and I'm answering and answering and answering. And at the time, I didn't realize, but they were testing me to see if I could handle the pressure of the amount of questions that were going to be coming and me thinking on my feet. So, was your interview process kind of similar, or how did that work out?
Well, interestingly enough, I obviously, I went through the background, the psych, the what is it called? The lie detector test, the polygraph
Yes.
was probably the most jarring for me because the poly guy, I almost felt like he was baiting me. He's like, "Come on, you never did." I'm like, "No," you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, the reward or the great feeling of, man, I finally passed this background and I have a start date was incredible. I will compare it to the first day of school, the first day of high school, where I was like ready. I had my new outfit, I was ready to, show up. But the interview, I will say, was probably, I walked out feeling good after that interview. And I'm going to tell you why is I prepared. I found back in those days, it was the days when Craigslist was probably one of the big things, right? And I remember as I'm going through my job search, I like posted something and I said, "Hey, are there any 911 dispatchers out there that can help me or give me advice on the hiring process?" And I wish I would remember this person's name. I will call her my 911 dispatcher fairy, godmother fairy, whatever. She coached me. She gave me resources. I think that's when 911 Monthly Magazine was really at the forefront of our communication in 911.
Mhm.
And I mean, there was so many articles on how to prepare. And the one thing that she drilled down to me was life over property. Life over property. And so when I walked in, and obviously you've got this, panel of 3 people interviewing, I felt good because I was prepared.
Right.
I knew what was important to the agency. I did a sit along. I remember my agency was going through a really large CAD upgrade, so they couldn't do a sit along. So I went to a different agency to do a sit along to learn about 911 dispatch, so I could speak to those things in my interview. So I really prepared. And I think that's been something that's followed me throughout my career as I've promoted, is being prepared, doing the research, and knowing a little bit about everything. But you have to be the one out there putting in the work to get there and to learn the information, to do the research. You can't expect people to spoon feed you the information.
Right. No, and that makes perfect sense. It also puts out there exactly what your mindset was and what you really wanted to do, because you couldn't do that there at the place, but you went to a different center to do it. And that right there shows, if I was the one hiring you, that's what I would look at as well. The fact that you couldn't do the sit along there with us, but you took the initiative to go to a different center to learn from there. And that's huge. That is a big thing. That also shows your work ethic. I remember um one of the centers that I applied for before the last center that I was at, which was in the county that I grew up in. But the one before that, though, I remember sitting there with the panel, and they were asking me the same type of questions, and it did seem like that, almost like baiting to say other things. I'm like, dude, I didn't do any of that other stuff, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, I did the other when I was in high school, but that was it. And I remember the lieutenant telling me, I don't care about that shit. I'm talking about, the hard stuff. I'm like, yeah, no, unless you're talking about liquor. That's the hard stuff. But yeah, that's how those panels go, man. And they're trying to put you off your game and stuff, because when you're taking phone calls, you got to be on your game all the time, and there's going to be questions coming at you all over the place, all types of scenarios, and you got to stay focused. So you're doing you go through that, you do your sit along. And was it during the sit along that I guess, let me say this first, let me ask this first. When you did that sit along, was it dead? Was there nothing going on, or was it actually busy and you got to see what it was actually like?
Well, it was, probably what a lot of people experience when you go on a sit along or a ride along, nothing happens.
Yeah.
But, I was able to, when I was talking to the person I was sitting along with, I'm like, hey, I'm trying to get hired. And but I came with questions, and I think she took a vested interest in that and saw that. And she's like, here's our 10 codes. Here's the phonetic alphabet. You need to know these things. And that's where things really took off for me. And again, it's like sit along really doesn't equate to when you actually start doing the job, where you're like, oh man, what did I get into?
Right. Yeah.
No, I got through training pretty quickly. But there were a lot of times towards the end where they were ready to sign me off to work solo, where I literally would say, I don't think I can do this.
Yeah.
There's been and that's happened to me so many times in my career where I'm like, what did I get myself into? I don't think I can do this.
So then did they extend that time, or did they just say, no, 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 you're ready. We know you're ready. And whoop.
Well, I mean, I never told anybody I wasn't ready.
Oh.
Crazy. I didn't express that to anybody. I expressed it to me.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, that is hilarious. I thought you were telling me that, that you
Oh,
had said that to them.
no.
I-
There were days where I would tell myself, there's no way I can do this. But, just push through, because
Right.
what's the other option? I go back to day one of when I got hired at my hometown agency, and I told you it was the first day of school. I was excited to meet everybody, and no one really cared except for one person who I will never forget, who took the time to introduce himself, and he smiled and he was like, we're so glad that you're here, versus everyone else in the room kind of looked over at me and, pretended to, be actively working.
Right.
But, I got taken into the break room, and the training binder was put in front of me, and first page is, let's talk about probation. And the training manager, and this is something where they say, I think we see this in memes or whatever, where it's like people may forget what you say to them, but they don't forget how you make them feel.
Right.
And, within 5 minutes, those feelings of excitement, they left, and it was terror, because she told me, doesn't matter if you're in the 11th month, the 30th day of your career, we can get rid of you like that. And that excitement of, man, this is a new career. This is a profession. I'm doing something important. It was like, man, I don't want to lose my job. Like, I got to feed my family, and the sad part is I thought that was the norm. I thought that was the expectation. And I did that to other people. You know, I trained how I was trained. I did that to other people because I thought that was the norm, and it wasn't.
And I would say that that probably helped you though, in a way, because you learned from it. Even though you trained that way as well. I mean, you are telling me right now that you found out that it really wasn't the norm. Excuse me. And you learn from that. You learn from other stuff that goes on. I know exactly what you're saying, because when I there was one point where we were so short staffed that all of us were trainers. We weren't certified training officers, but
Mhm.
we all had to be trainers because we needed to get people in there.
Yeah.
So they had people training all the time, and we would switch on the teams, but some of them were having issues, others were getting pushed through so that they could, be considered full time,
Yeah.
and help out with shifts. But a lot of that was, kind of eating our young type thing. and
Absolutely.
but all those people too ended up learning. It's completely different now. It's not like that anymore. In some places, I'm sure it still might be, but I think with conversations like this that we're having, stories like yours and others where people are learning that things are, let's say the old guard is not there. It's a new day.
Mhm.
Things are being done a lot different now, and for the better.
Yeah.
Sure, a little bit of a tough love here and there is okay, but it's not like it was before. And
No, it's not, and it shouldn't be.
Mhm.
I think, back in my day, it was we just need to make sure you pass because we need you to count. Like, hurry up, you need to count. And now, at least for me, when I view our new employees and even our tenured people, it's like, how about we not set them up just to pass? How about we set them up to be successful throughout their
Exactly.
career, throughout their training? Yeah, we want them to pass, we want them to count. It helps you reduce the overtime, the burnout, but there's still a human being involved. And it's our job to set them up for success, not set them up for failure. I mean, what's the benefit to that? There
Right.
is none. No one wins. No one wins in that situation.
Exactly. No, you are fully correct there. And and that's how you keep people as well. I tell people have asked me, how do you get away from this turnover and keeping people and all of that? And like, it's got to start at the top, man. Like, in my opinion, it's got to start out at the top. If I'm working at a place where the director or assistant director isn't taking that time with us in there, or is just kind of doing their own thing, I mean, I'm not going to want to work for you, even no matter how good the pay is. I'm not gonna wanna
Mhm.
be there. So, it starts at the top. If you've got someone, who is, like, just really pushing for those that are in the center, for what they're doing, for their needs, any extra training or, really paying attention to their mental health and wellness and all of that, that's how you're gonna keep people there. Yeah, the money is good, but we all know that the money isn't the greatest in some centers, and they're there because they wanna help people. That's why people get into this to begin with. Some people do fall into it. They're looking at a place to start out, but, a lot of those people that say that, they end up finding out that this is actually their calling and that this is where they want to be. Some people do leave, yes, but the majority, they stay because they want to help.
And I agree 100% with that. I think even in my career, as I look back, um, there were times where I was like, oh, this is just a job. I'm just doing it. I'm just doing it. But you get to a point where it's like, man, this is pretty cool.
Yeah,
And what I'm doing is freaking amazing. And, why not be a dispatcher? We can find all the reasons why you shouldn't, right? The burnout and all these things. But what are the reasons why you should be? And I think that's where we, as a people who are in it already, and as we hire people, we're so focused on painting the negative, well, you're going to work. Are you going to work all this overtime? You have to work the holidays, right? You're going to miss out on family events, but it's like, okay, well, that's the reality.
Yeah.
But let's talk about all the good things too. The community, you're a team, and a lot of people don't experience that at other places of employment, this team atmosphere, this family type unit. And like a family, there's ups and downs. And I don't know that that's, even myself, I'm not sure that that's something that I've been all that great at pushing. But I think that with reflection and just learning from other people in the field, that's why I think it's so important to not be the big fish in the small pond, where you need to get yourself outside of that comfort zone and be little for a minute so that you can absorb things and learn things. I think it only benefits you and it benefits the people around you.
Of course. Yeah, definitely. Now, you end up going through your training and everything. You're walking in there. One of the things I wanted to ask actually is, when you walk in, what are you looking at? For those who are listening and those who are watching, what is it like for you as you're walking into the center? How many screens are there? To kind of paint the picture, and how are you feeling? Because I know for me, even though I had 3.5 years of experience from the one person small police department, going into a county central dispatch was overwhelming. Seeing all the stations, there was only 5 in there, but still, it was more than what I had dealt with before. And listening to the amount of calls that were coming in, I mean, the call volume alone was way up there. So it was a little overwhelming. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do it, but I knew that it was something that I wanted to do because I loved doing it when I had first started out, and I wanted to continue doing it. So for you, what was that like for you?
Well, when I went to my current agency, I came in as a supervisor. So I was still working on the floor. But for me, silly me, I was like, man, this is exciting. This is exactly why I left my agency. I wanted to do something more. I wanted to be involved in something greater. And I remember telling my little sister, I'm like, man, it's like working in the Pentagon, all these screens. You're involved in all these, because my center, we handle mutual aid within the state. And so I'm like, you're part of this, those big fires that are out in California, we're responsible for sending a response. I mean, I was excited. I was excited for being part of something greater. Mm-hmm. And at my first agency, we dispatched police and fire. But it was obviously, I'm sure a lot of dispatchers know that when you're in this kind of combination center, fire's kind of by the wayside and PD is the priority. And so when I went to my new center, it was just fire and EMS. So when I would EMD calls, I'd still be thinking like a PD dispatcher. When they'd call and say, she fell, I'm like, well, in my mind, I'm like, well, who pushed her? What happened? You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
And so to go from this adversarial relationship with your callers to this, I don't even know how to, people thank you when you're done helping them off of a medical. Mm-hmm. And to go from that night and day kind of experience, it was a breath of fresh air. I won't lie. It's really different. I always say I'm still a PD dispatcher at heart, but it was just very different. But I was very excited to be there, and I still get excited when I'm like, man, I can't believe we do all of that with this much.
Right.
And my team's freaking amazing. There's such a group of, they don't even know, they're a bunch of beasts, like hardcore, like they get the job done. And now I'm talking like me, like they just handle business, and then they go get Starbucks and come back and they handle business again. And, that's what I like, it's like, I'm super proud of them, like I'm super prideful, and they're freaking rock stars.
No. And I know exactly what you're talking. I didn't get to an assistant director or director. I was a supervisor before I switched over, but I felt the same way. Like every time we rock something, I remember thinking, hell yeah. And also telling them like, yeah, we just did that shit right there. the three of us.
Yeah.
Because for us, our minimum was 3. You know, I think there was Monday through Thursday. It was a minimum of 3 for the entire county. And we had tons of agencies that we were dispatching for, and everything. You know, we did all 3 disciplines, but on the weekend there was 4 minimum. We had um, one that would stagger, that would do a 1P to 1A type shift. But every single time, man, especially if we have to set off a tornado siren and people start tripping out. Like, we take cover. Like, did you hear the siren? Like, yeah, like we should
Oh,
take cover. And you know, so it would get crazy. But then after it was all said and done, even though 911 doesn't stop, it does slow down a little bit. But after those crazy times, yeah, we would all sit back and be like, boom, we did that. We just did all of that. So I fully know that feeling. Like, as you were talking about that, like, my adrenaline started picking up because I was like, yeah, like, want to get back in there
yeah.
and take those calls. It's awesome. So let me ask, do you remember any of your earlier calls? Because I remember a bunch of mine. But, you know, when you were first starting out, whether it be in your original agency or, you know, where you're at now, you know, as you were coming in, you know, any early calls, either the very first one, if you remember that, or some of the earlier ones that you remember dealing with.
You know, I do. It's interesting you asked me that because, you know, I've obviously watched your podcast, your videos, and, you know, I see your I am 911 posts, and a lot of the calls that people talk about are very traumatic.
Mhm.
And I will say for me, I somehow built a wall, and the suicides, and, you know, my baby's not breathing, or, oh my God, you know, there's been a shooting, you get desensitized to it.
Mhm.
And in my first agency, it's an urban environment. I grew up there. So even as a kid, I already experienced some of those things, right? I remember as a kid, I'd hear gunshots. And as a kid, I remember I would say to myself, man, that was a good one. What kid knows that someone just got lit up and that was a good one, right?
Mhm.
So I think because I kind of grew up, that was around me, not in my household, but around me. When I got to my home agency, I was already used to it and desensitized to a lot of that violence. So it didn't impact me as much as others, right? Because it was the norm, which is weird. And I wouldn't want someone to think that that's the norm, right? Like,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
not the norm. That's not the norm. Shouldn't be the norm anyways. And so a lot of the calls that are traumatic for me that I carry, they aren't your suicides. They're not your, oh my God, I'm instructing someone to hide in the closet, or instructing someone to cut their sibling down, you know, all of those. For me, it was the calls where I could not give the level of service that I wanted to give to that caller because I was so inundated with doing other things. For example, and I'll never forget this one, was trying to give CPR instructions while working a primary PD channel, where it was like 1195, 1195, 1194, like just nonstop, to a man who had just called 911 because he found his wife not breathing. He straight up said she's dead.
Yeah.
And he's telling me the story. We've been married over 40 years. And it's like, I kept having to tell him, hold on, sir, because I had to answer the radio traffic. And I was so angry after I hung up with that call. So those are some of the calls that really upset me, is that person called probably the only time they've called 911, and they're going to remember that moment and remember and say, that person was I mean, what kind of shop are they running up there? Why couldn't that person stay on the line with me? They kept telling me to hold on. I can't hold on. I need a helper. So those are some of the calls that really have stayed with me. I mean, some of the funny ones are totally inappropriate. But and those were the ones that you laugh about, right, on duty with your peers.
Right.
But yeah, those are some of the ones that have stuck with me. I can't tell you that I remember a lot of calls while I was in training. Maybe because I was so focused on, what is the penal code? Am I asking these questions? Am I putting it in order from top to bottom, right? Where you're not that,
Yeah, exactly.
invested in the content, but
Mhm.
you're trying to make it fit, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
But I will tell you the call that I knew that I could not be a call taker for the rest of my life was when someone called and said their neighbor had been down on the ground for like 2 or 3 days, old lady, and her children haven't visited her. And she had no running water, no electricity. And that one hit me, because one, I was experiencing my own internal issues in life. I was suffering from postpartum depression,
Mhm.
and I was in a really dark place at that time. And so, I think about it now. I'm like, what's so traumatic about that call? Okay, well, yes, it's very sad, but that one, like, I almost lost it on the phone, where like my voice started cracking, because I wanted to cry. Because I was in this like mindset of, oh my God, I don't want to be that person. I don't ever want to be that, old lady that's found 3 days later down and none of her children have checked on her, So those are probably the two that have stuck with me the most.
I think that's what's hard too about this job sometimes, because being an empath is sometimes a double-edged sword, because we put ourselves in the place of our caller, right? And in that situation, what's going on, because we can't see it. We
Yeah.
cannot see what is going on. So in order for us to imagine, and sometimes the imagination is worse, right?
Yes.
Than what it exactly is going on when people get out there. But we put ourselves in their shoes to, one, feel, and two, really relate to what's going on so that we can help them, and also get the information, relay the information to whoever is going out there. There's so much that goes on. But I think, and in your situation, with what you were dealing with, you were doing what you do, or what we do as dispatchers and call takers, is we put ourselves in those shoes, and sometimes it is overwhelming. It's like a suicide call that I took, where these two brothers were involved, and one of them ended up shooting himself in the head, and that one messed me up, because I I was putting myself in those shoes, like, damn, what if this was my brother and I, what if it was this? And when I got off of the phone, um, I remember my supervisor looking over at me and saying, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah, I'm fine." But I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was not at all. I just continued on with the shift. And it was when I got out of work, I called my brother right away, and he answers, and the first thing I said was, "I love you," and then
Hmm.
he responds with, "Shut the hell up." Like, what's going on? Why would you just call me and tell me that at like 4:30 in the morning? And then I told him what had happened and that I needed to talk to him. It was the only way that I was going to feel better, was to hear his voice. And he's like, "Damn, I love you too." So I'm right there with you with those types of calls that stick. And there's stuff that happens in our own lives um that affect some of those situations as well. Now, was there a call, or was there a situation, or was there something that happened that really solidified the fact that this job was something that you were meant to do?
I will say that it wasn't a call, but it was more so I feel and I felt at the time, especially when going over to my new center, because I truly feel that, I wasn't brought over to train or teach the dispatchers how to do their jobs. They had the mechanics, right? So, I'm a brand new supervisor. I've never sat in front of the dispatch console at the center except for a sit along. And how am I supposed to train them or teach them how to do their jobs? How to do, you do this in CAD, you do that. I wasn't hired for that. What I was hired to do was to help with morale, was to bring soft skills to the table. And I believe that the moment that I rallied up my team at the time, the dispatchers on my shift, to put together quarterly training, I really felt like that was a moment where I'm like, I need to be doing this. I need to be motivating my team to do X, Y, and Z. So at our agency, when I joined up, they were doing quarterly training, and or was it every other month? I don't remember how it was at the time. But the people on shift were saying, you know what? We want to train. We want to train on what we want to train. I am an SME, I should be able to do X, Y, and Z. And I agreed. I think that's part of, developing your people, making them feel good about what they do and as individuals. And so I remember going out to the floor, and I had some strong dispatchers, right? They knew how to dispatch. I didn't need to tell them what engine needed to go to what, I didn't know, right? But to have them and say, hey, let's sit down. How are we going to present this? Because you have to present this to your chain of command and say, this is what you want to do. You can't just bitch about it.
Right.
You can't just bitch about it. And we're so good about bitching about things, and it's like, they're going to want an agenda. They're going to want an itinerary. They're going to want you to present something to them that says, hey, this is the subject that I want to teach on. Here's why I'm qualified to teach it, and here's the content. And I remember, a couple dispatchers like, I don't even know why we're going to put all the work into this. They're just going to say no. And I was like, how do you know that? You haven't even tried. Let's work on it. And sure as, that's been something that we've encouraged in our centers. Like, if you have something you want to teach, come teach it. But present it. And I think that teaches people, if they want to promote, that's something they can talk about in an interview, right? They can say, you know what? I put together this training at my home agency. I put together the PowerPoint. I did this, and that. I presented it up the chain. I mean, there's so many different lessons, opportunities for lessons in just doing that. And that's how I view things. And that's how I knew it's like, you know what? I want to do this. This is something that I enjoy. Whether or not, I can continue or I want to continue to answer phones and speak to the public, that's another story. But there's something else that I want to do here. I want to help people grow. I want to make the center better, and make it a better place for the people.
Dang, man. Need to go work for you.
No, I mean, it's, I always say, Ricardo, I may not do everything right, but I walk away every day knowing that everything that I do comes from a place of positive intention.
Right.
And that's how I go to bed peacefully, is I never try to, who goes to work trying to make it a miserable place, and if you are, you shouldn't be there. Right.
Yeah.
But I also realize as a manager, it's like, we have to meet both parties both ways, right? There's a budget. There are civil service rules we have to follow, but how do we make it work to where both sides are happy, or at least meet halfway? So that's really how I operate,
What was it like for you switching from, let's say, going across the hall? That's how we put it when at my old center was, well, you're going to be across the hall now in the office. And, how did that work out for you? Because, and I know I've mentioned this a bunch of times, but there's that whole, those memes that go around on Facebook, and I have friends who have done it as well, where they've got someone who's either switching shifts or they're going to a different center, or they're becoming a supervisor or assistant director or something, and they get a cake that says, "You're dead to us now."
Well, I remember when I got promoted from supervisor to manager.
Yeah.
At my current agency, one of my dispatchers put like an eviction notice on my locker. I have a picture of it, and it was pretty sweet, you know. And it's like they were happy for me, but
Cool.
it's been challenging. I mean, it continues to be because, and talk to any manager, any director, they'll tell you, you know, especially if you've been a dispatcher before, right? It's like you've been there, you know the pain that you go through, you know how bad it sucks when you get that sick call and you have to stay, right? You had plans, you have to stay. So I think the biggest struggle for me has been seeing the pain in my people's faces and not being able to help to the level that I want to help, you know, or not being able to make change as quick as I want. I remember when I first got promoted, I was like, ooh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. We're doing all these things. And then it was like, yeah, Rosa, you're not. And if you want to do it, here's the process.
Yeah, there's always a process.
There's a process, and it takes forever. I mean, it took me forever to try to go outside to get a different background investigator. You know, we were using a background company that we were contracted to use, and it was taking forever. And I'm like, why are we doing this if there are other background companies that can do it in a shorter time? You know, let's reduce the time. You know, it took me like 3 years to be able to do that. Man. You know, the politics, the purchasing structure in our county, you know, and but people don't realize is when you're trying to work on those things, there's all these other things that you have to do, right? And it's like you're just one person and you can't do it all. Yeah. So that's been the most challenging, where it's like, you know, we're human. We know when the dispatchers are pissed off at us, you know, like this whole COVID thing, right? You know, it's like you have to take your temperatures. You have to wash your hands every single time you come in. You have to do this. You have to do that. And I think I saw some memes where it was like everyday things were changing, right? For COVID. When you take a call, ask this. When it's that call, you don't ask this, you know? And it was like, even me, I'm like, I would be annoyed. I would be frustrated, you know? And so it's like, I'm sorry, guys, but it's the thing that we just got to do. And that's been hard for me and continues to be hard, where it's like when you have to play the bad guy, you know, it's like, I don't want to be the bad guy, you know? But it is what it is. And like I said, I just tell myself, as long as I do things with positive intentions and I think about them, right? Then that's what it is.
And I think that's what people appreciate as well. It's someone who is being real with them and not beating around the bush. Someone who, and I think it even works in your advantage even more so because you come from where everyone else comes from. You know, an example as well is when I was in dispatch, our director and assistant director were part of our crew, and they moved their way up, and so it felt like, you know, it was good because we had some of our own up in the higher tier. And but what sucked too, though, is that we expected the same thing. Like, yeah, they're gonna push for change, they're gonna do this and that. They did push for change, they did do this and that, but just like you said, there's a process, and it took forever. And I think we didn't understand that in the beginning, but we figured it out. And even for myself, when I ended up promoting up to supervisor, you know, one of the questions was, what is it that you want to do with this position? What is it that you're looking for? Why do you want to be in this position? And that was one of those things where I mentioned, I want to make changes. I want to do things to help everyone around here. But again, it was a process. It wasn't, I couldn't just go and say, this is going to happen.
Well, that, and I think, you know, it's a double-edged sword, where it's like you want to make these positive changes, but they're not positive changes for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. And so you do have some who benefit from those changes and some who don't. So it's like, what do you do? Do I sit back and not make any changes? For example, I'm sure everybody's trying to lean out overtime. For me, knock on wood, I haven't been asked to lean out on overtime financially.
Mhm.
For me, I'm constantly trying to lean out for the benefit of my people. They've worked their asses off during this COVID thing. They've weathered the storm of constantly you come in and things have changed. The policy and procedure has changed. But now we're in fire season and we have to upstaff. And it's like, okay, well, where do I cut so it can be some kind of a break for them? Can they come in later so they don't have to wake up as early? Can they leave early from that overtime shift so that they can go home early? But then you have people who are like, nope, if I'm here, I'm going to be here for the full 12. Or you have people who are like, thank you, Jesus. I do not want to be here at 0600. I would rather be here a couple hours later to sleep in, and it's like sometimes that's where I'm like, Lord help me, because, I'm trying to do the right thing, but you just can't please everyone. And I just tell myself I'm just doing the best that I can, and it's coming from a good place. And
Right. You got to choose your battles too.
Yeah.
Yeah, for everyone involved. Now, so we move from that. We continue with your story, but we move on from where you started and your journey, and which is an excellent one. And then we get to CalNina.
Yes.
We get to the CalNina conference. Now, this was the second time I've been to a CalNina conference. The first time, I think, was in 2015, I believe it was, and it was a good one. I always wanted to go back, just didn't have a chance to, but I got to go back for this most recent one. And you ended up giving the opening speech. Now, let me pull this up. I've got something that I want to pull up here. For those who are listening, I'm pulling up a picture of Rosa where she is at the podium giving this speech. Now, can you give us just a quick summary of what this was about? How you came about doing this as well?
Yeah, so I'm currently the second VP for CalNina, and as we prepared for our conference, CalNina 2020, I was tasked with finding someone to do the opening remarks. And we've all been to these conferences, right? And usually you try to get the local chiefs to come out to, say, welcome to my city. So nice to have you all 911 professionals. Let me tell you a story about the time you changed my life. And it's usually you dispatch them to the most critical call of their career. So you start off with, you dispatched me to this call. They jump into the details of this heroic call. And that's why you're important. Without you, we couldn't do our job. And that stuff gets old. Mm-hmm. I personally check out sometimes, not all the times, because you do have sometimes that are really, really engaged, right? And you can tell this is not a recycled story.
Right. Yes.
And I expressed to my team, the executive board, I'm like, I want to do the opening remarks, and my message is going to address everyone that's there. I wanted it to leave an impression on the first time attendees.
Which there were many first time attendees there. It was awesome.
Yes. I wanted the first time attendees to get some guidance right out the gate, how to make the most out of the conference. And I also wanted to address the more seasoned conference attendees who may or may not go to all the classes, the workshops. Maybe they're more to network versus gain content out of the conference. And I also wanted to address the vendors and the vendors who support the conference and support our profession. The three things for our new attendees was, push yourself. If you don't know what CPE is, or what is Next Gen 911, if you see a GIS class, just go to it, learn about it. For our attendees who have been here often, just go to a class. You're always learning. Don't just, sleep in and not go, or don't just, go check out the city highlights, right? But invest and also share your story with others, because you might help someone, and in turn it's going to help you. It's going to rejuvenate you. It's going to re-energize you and remind you why you're still in it. And for our vendor partners, it was really remind them that even though they are speaking to just your line level dispatcher, right, is that line level dispatcher is eventually going to make some decisions on equipment and purchasing. And you always remember how someone made you feel. If you walk up to the rapid deploy booth as a line level dispatcher and they make you feel like you're less than because you're not the money maker, you're not the decision maker, they're going to remember that. And when it's time for them to promote and start, they're going to remember, oh, I don't know, they have really bad, poor customer service skills. Let me tell you a story. You don't forget those things. And for me, it was really just, number one, it helped me, right? Because I don't like public speaking anyways. But I wanted people to relate to me. I wanted the new people to relate to me. I'm just like you, and you can be up here too one day.
Right.
Giving the opening remarks. Someone who, I don't know, is Spanish is their first language, and here I'm up there pronouncing my name the way it should be pronounced, and they're like, wow. Or a female, or our vendor partners. I just wanted everybody to know that they had a purpose there, and to start it off right, set the tone.
And it definitely did, because I remember sitting there with my friend Leah, and man, as I was listening to you talk, I was thinking, hell yeah. Like I was getting into it, and other people were too. I mean, they were cheering while you were talking. And it wasn't just at the end, it was during the talk, and in a good way, of course.
Right.
And then when you were done, I mean, we were clapping, and I remember yelling out, hell yeah. Like, that was excellent. That was awesome. And it's good to set that tone, especially for, the vendors, the industry partners out there, because they need to know certain things. I did my Imagine Listening session at North Carolina at their conference a couple years back, and we were inside an amphitheater of this casino where the conference was going on, and I remember standing on stage, and the whole area that we had, it was full, and people were standing, even though it was an amphitheater. But our section of it, there was people standing still, and all the vendors were in there as well. And I'm doing this session, and I remember getting on the mic and saying to all of them, I have to tell you right now, if you're about to hear some shit, because if you don't know what 911 dispatchers and call takers go through or what they do, this is something that you need to hear, and you're going to hear. And a lot of the good thing too, though, is a lot of the industry partners, they have people that come from the center, specifically like rapid deploy. A lot of them come from public safety, which is awesome. One of my good friends, Ryan Hard, was an EMT where he was at before, and now he's over here. So those are kind of the ones that I gravitate to as well, are the ones that come from where we come from. But that was one of those things too, where I tell them that, and I remember a lot of the industry partners looking over as I'm talking, and then we start, and I shit you not, within just a few minutes of a first, some of those early stories that were being told, almost all of them were standing behind the chairs and were listening to those stories and really taking it in. And later on that day, they, a few of them came up to me and said, man, we do this, but I had no idea that it went that deep. And, that was awesome. Thank you for doing that. I'm glad that we were there. So for you to be able to set that tone was perfect, because you, for a lack of a better way to put it, we're speaking to all disciplines: dispatch, call takers, the industry partners, directors, those who are in there doing the AV, even them. And a lot of those I know have worked with you guys for a long time, and they know they're learning, and everyone is learning, and that is what made your talk so powerful, and I loved it.
Well, thank you. It was, I felt really good after, and it really encouraged me to do more of that because I did get such positive feedback. I was stopped a lot of times after saying, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much for speaking. That was great. Can you show me what classes to take?" For me, that was, ooh,
Yeah.
that was so
Right.
rewarding, for someone. It was their first time there and they felt welcomed and comfortable to come up to talk to us. Because I think from my experience in going to these conferences, you see the executive board or these people who are running it, and it's like, oh, they're, you don't want to come over and talk to them. But for me, it was like, no, like, come talk to us.
Right.
You guys are going to be the next leaders, the next ones championing our cause, right?
Right.
And so get in there, learn about it. Please come talk to me. I mean, I love when people come up or reach out, whether that's on Facebook, wherever, and like, hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? Or how did you do that? It's so rewarding. And, those are the small victories, I think, in our careers and our professions, is when you can, and it's so cliche, right? When you can give back. But it's amazing when you can, and to be able to provide people that support and for them to feel comfortable, with approaching you. I think that's huge. It's amazing,
And then we go from there, and a few months later, you're now doing the keynote on the last day of the Dare to Be Great conference, and it was championing your cause. Now, what was your I guess your inspiration and motivation for this session? I remember when you sent me the PowerPoint, the presentation, I don't know, a week or so before we were going to do all of this. I was already pumped for your session because you put so much of you into it, and a lot of what you've told us already here on this episode too. But there was more to your championing the cause.
Yeah, I think for me, I've always appreciated when people are very candid and just themselves when talking, or in whatever setting. We can be in a meeting, or, I don't like BS. I just don't like it. I see through it. And I don't want to be that way either. When people see me, people talk to me, I want them to relate, and I want them to know when she's telling me something, it's just because she means it.
Right.
She's not just trying to, oh, let me butter you up, or let me tell you what you want to hear. And I don't like that. I have I can't even get out the words to tell you how much I just dislike that. And so, I don't want to come off as this, polished Stanford graduate with this amazing vocabulary that's going to blow your mind. That's not who I am. I'm GED class of 99. Okay. I had my first kid when I was 16 and a half, and I worked my ass off to get to where I am today. And this is how you need to work your ass off to get to where you want to be. Right. And that's where it was coming from, where it's like, you have to be your biggest advocate. I say that time and time again. You have to be your biggest advocate, and you have to get yourself to where you want to be. You have to map it out and check off those boxes. And that's where my inspiration came from. And I think I shared this to you after Dare to Be Great, but there was a moment where I wanted to pull out and I didn't want to do my presentation. Just because I, again, was kind of in this rut, personally and even professionally. It was right during when all the COVID stuff started, really ramping up. I mean, I didn't even want to say the word in my presentation. I didn't want to acknowledge it. Mm-hmm. So it was just my way of just sharing my message. It's something that I share with everyone. I share it with my children. It's like, you have to hustle. You can't wait for people to spoon feed you the information that you need. yes, find mentors, right? Find people that are going to be invested in you and are experienced and can tell you how to check off those boxes.
Right.
But once they map it out for you, you got to be the one to hustle through them. And that's what I think that's the message that I wanted to send was don't be stagnant. If you want to go somewhere, whether that's, whatever it is, you want to drop those 10 pounds, well, put in the work, right? And start small. Don't try to, do all these 20 different things at the same time, join CrossFit, start fasting, start juicing, start doing all these crazy things, because that's not going to be good for you. But at the same time, it's, also surround yourself with people who are going to help you succeed. And that's the biggest thing that I think people need to understand is, when you're chasing that goal and you want to be better, guess what? You're going to have to drop some dead weight.
Yeah.
And that might mean some of your friends. I think I said it, you can't expect to, fly with the eagles if you're hanging out with the chickens. You just can't. And, I'm very fortunate that I've found really good mentors in my life. My first one was my manager, dispatch manager at my first agency. And I remember when he gave me my evaluation for the next step to where I can start training, he told me, he goes, my advice to you is, I forgot exactly how he said it, but basically be aware of who you're surrounding yourself with. And I remember at that time, I didn't get it. I was like, what are you talking about? My friends are just fine. But now it's like the same things you would tell your children, right? You want to surround yourself with people who are going to help you be great or be even greater. You
Build that tribe.
Right, with your tribe. And my tribe. And that's something that I believe in entirely. It's like you can't change your attitude if you're hanging out with people who have a shitty attitude.
Exactly. Because it's just gonna build up and it's gonna grow and it's gonna eat you up.
Absolutely. And it's okay to say, you know what? That's not the circle I want to be in. That's not what I want to read anymore. That's not what I want to watch anymore. I want to watch this. It's perfectly fine. And if people judge you for that, oh well, if they're clearly not your friends.
Yeah.
If they can't support you. Yeah, so dust them off the shoulder.
Exactly.
And keep it moving. Keep it moving, because those that are truly want the best for you, they're going to understand.
Right.
Exactly. And I can't say that enough is, you want to promote, you want to do all these things, you have to champion your cause. You have to be your biggest advocate, because no one's going to be your biggest advocate except for you.
And it's a great message. And going back, I don't know if you've gone back at all, and those who are watching or listening, if you were part of that conference, and you still can be, you can still register and watch all of them on demand, or go to YouTube and watch them all too. But on Crowdcast, in the comments, people are still posting in there.
Oh, wow.
And everyone loved the session, like all of them. But it was really good. And, to get your, there was raw emotion in there as well. And, everything that you were saying was real. And I think that's what everyone really related to, was that you weren't feeding a line of bullshit. You were telling it how it was. And it was coming from you. And that is why I wanted you to be that keynote speaker, because I saw that at the Calnina conference, and it was a powerful message for that one, and it was a powerful message for this one. And just throughout your entire story, it's been an entire powerful message. So thank you so much for all of that and for what you do. As we're going into the wrap up of this episode, and again, I thank you for being on. I'm going to pull up another picture here, and I want you to kind of give an overview of what this is, and what you were taking part in, and I guess the status of what all of this is about. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this up here, and those who are listening, you will get the explanation of this as well. So here it is. So what are we looking at here?
So this is a picture of me and Assemblymember Salas. That was the day that we introduced AB 1945. And that was January 22nd of this year. It was such an amazing day. So Maribel Stinson, she's actually my hero. She advocated for all of the 911 dispatchers in California, reached out to Assemblymember Salas's office and said, hey, 911 dispatchers are in the same classification as clerical staff, but we're not clerical staff. We're the first of the first responders, and we need to be classified as such. Mm-hmm. And so just one voice started that. She put it in writing. She followed the process. And on that day, the county board, as well as a few APCO members and a few local dispatchers, showed up for a press hearing where he introduced the bill. So it is June 25th, and I am very happy to say that it will be heard by the Senate very soon here. Because of the whole COVID situation, things have been kind of weird up at the state capitol with trying to get everybody in the same room. How do people vote? We've had a few obstacles. We had some of our own, unfortunately, first responder, what would I call them? Chapters, I guess, organizations, write letters not to support our classification as first responders. Some have felt that it would water down their classification, and I'm talking about the firefighters and some of the police officer organizations, feeling that we would being a 911 dispatcher classified as first responder would water down that classification, and also could impact some of the benefits. So this bill, it's purely just reclassifying us as first responders. It has gone before the PERS committee, which is basically our pension here at the state. And it's gone through, I forgot the name of the committee, but basically where they review if there's going to be any financial impacts. And that has gone through there seamlessly. So it's been going pretty well for us, and it'll be a huge victory for all California dispatchers. 911 public safety dispatchers. So it's been incredibly rewarding to go through this process, to be part of the process at the forefront legislatively. But it's going to be great, and hopefully we'll find out here very soon if we'll be celebrating on the steps of the state capitol, to where we can share that message with all of the dispatchers within the United States. I know that some states have already reclassified, and I'm hoping that with us, California joining, it will kick off the rest of the states' cause to reclassify 911 dispatchers.
That'll be really good. Yeah, because I've been watching what's been going on there in your state and throughout other states here, and things are picking up. There are some states where they're just not doing anything at all, but I think it's slowly happening. I think there's a lot of stuff that has been introduced, but like you were saying, things are with the pandemic and all of that. It's just a slow process. Now with this, it goes through and everything. Where do you see it going? Like where are the benefits from this as well? In the future, because right off the bat, there's not going to be. It's the reclassification,
right?
It's the addition of 911 dispatchers and call takers within that classification. But in the future, like where do you see it going? In your circles there in the state of California, I'm sure there's been conversation as to what it could look like in a year or two or 5 or whichever. What does the future look like with that reclassification in place?
I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, let's all be honest, dispatchers would love to be able to get a safety retirement. I don't know that that's in the cards for us just now. But, an example of how this may help us is we had the Napa County fires. where and in Sonoma County, where a lot of homes were decimated, a lot of lives were lost because of these large fires. And a lot of the dispatchers out there dealt with a lot, and they were not given the same amount of wellness visits as the police officers because they were not considered first responders. So in our discussion of AB 1945, that was one of the big things was, well, our people need help too. And why do I get 3 visits, but you get 10? I get it. You're out in the street, but I was on the phone with people yelling for help and they died. Or I was on the phone trying to tell people how to, the fire's right next to me. What do I do? Well, you're not trained to handle that. And now you're using common sense, right? What you think sounds good, you're exposed, and so hopefully it starts us down the path of getting us the resources that we need. And I'm hoping that that's with mental health services, the EAP visits, those sort of things. But I can't speak too much about it because I am not, in the legislative office. I don't know what all these processes are. But the hope is to one day be able to just have the same level of respect and just be treated the same, as our other first responders.
Perfect.
But I will say, in closing of that, for the states that are looking at this, I want to remind them that California, it started with one voice. It started with one dispatcher who took the time to write a letter to an assembly member. And I think I've talked about this before, where it's like, as dispatchers, we're so good at complaining and venting. Oh man, it's too cold in here. It's too hot in here. Man, the fridge is dirty. The microwave's dirty. Who's going to clean that? No one takes it really upon themselves to champion these causes. And I think that's where we as 911 professionals, regardless of rank, it's like you can make a difference. You can do something. Don't wait for someone else to do it because it may not happen. So if you've got, you're passionate about that and you're passionate about starting that, talk to your team. Maybe you and a group of dispatchers can start it. Why not? So that's the lesson for me was that, man, that started with one person. We've been talking about it for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. But man, mind blown. Let me write this letter and send it to the assembly member's office. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
No, we got to get better at that.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on. This has been a lot of fun learning so much more about you, and for those watching and listening to learn more about you and your thought process and how all of this just came about. It is just such an amazing story. So thank you so much for being on. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. And it means the world to me. And I hope that, someone can take a little bit from my story. That was only, a glimpse of it. I'd love to share more and speak to more people about it. Or if anybody needs help, you have my contact information, and I'd be more than willing to share my email address if someone wants to reach out. But just be kind to yourself, give yourself some grace, we're in it together and we'll get through it together. And, thanks again for tuning in and listening. I appreciate it.
Perfect. So for those who are watching, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that'll be wttpodcast@gmail.com. And you can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcasts. You can follow us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches podcast. This show will always be free, but if you are looking for any bonus content, the behind the scenes series that I'm doing, discounts to the store, swag, t-shirts, all those other things that are going on, you can check us out over at patreon.com/WTT podcast. This episode has been sponsored by Rapid Deploy and supported by InDigital, a leader next gen core services. And this can be heard 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, as well as withinthetrenches.net. And the video version of this will be on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever else I post it. So have a good one, everyone. and we'll talk to you soon.